I used to believe love was enough. I thought that if I loved Emily with all my heart, if I supported her dreams and built a life with her, that would be all we'd ever need. For 10 years, we shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our plans for the future. She wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend, my partner in every sense. And that's what made it so hard to accept that even love, no matter how strong, couldn't prevent betrayal. It started slowly, in ways that were easy to overlook at first. A missed dinner here, a last-minute meeting there. Emily's job as a project manager had always been demanding, but I'd never minded. I respected her drive, her ambition. I took on extra chores, made sure the kids got to soccer practice and piano lessons. I was proud of her. But over time, her long days at the office turned into late nights. Another late meeting, she'd text, followed by, "I'll be home by 10. I told myself it was the nature of her work, that she was doing it for us, for our family. But when 10 o'clock turned into 11, and 11 into midnight, I started to feel a pit growing in my stomach. The first real crack appeared on a Friday night. Emily had been unusually cheerful all week, humming to herself as she got ready in the mornings, smiling at her phone in ways I hadn't seen in months. I was happy to see her happy, even if I didn't know what had caused the shift. But then she came home late, her hair freshly styled, her makeup still flawless, something that never happened after her usual long workdays. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Sorry, the meeting ran over," before heading straight to the shower. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she avoided eye contact, the way her smile faltered when I asked how the meeting went, made my chest tighten. I didn't press her, not that night. Instead, I lay awake long after she had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was imagining things. Over the next few weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. Her phone was suddenly off limits. She'd always been open about her messages, leaving her phone on the kitchen counter or handing it to me when I needed to look something up. But now it was constantly in her pocket or face down on the coffee table. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen out of habit, not intending to pry. A message preview appeared. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." My heart stopped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My first instinct was to dismiss it. Maybe it was a coworker joking around, a friend being overly enthusiastic. But deep down, I knew better. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my hand, my thoughts racing. When Emily came out of the bathroom, I confronted her. I showed her the message and asked, "Who is this from? And what is he talking about?" Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then she sighed and sat down beside me. "It's not what you think," she said. "It's just a coworker. We had a project dinner last night, and he was thanking me for the help." I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of truth. "Then why didn't you mention it before? Why does it sound so personal?" She hesitated. "I didn't want you to worry," she said finally. "I know I've been working a lot lately, and I thought if I told you about the dinner, you'd think I wasn't prioritizing us." Her explanation sounded plausible, but the uneasy feeling in my chest didn't go away. I nodded slowly, not wanting to start a fight, but the seed of doubt had been planted. In the weeks that followed, Emily's behavior grew more erratic. She'd come home later and later, sometimes slipping into the bedroom without a word. When I tried to talk to her, she'd say she was tired or stressed, brushing off my concerns with a forced smile. Then one evening, she announced she was going out for a networking event. I offered to come along. After all, I'd attended her work functions before. But she shook her head. "It's just a small thing, really. Just a few people from the office. You'd be bored." Her words stung, but I didn't push. She left the house in a hurry, and I sat alone in the living room, staring at the door long after it had closed behind her. Something inside me snapped that night. I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. I couldn't keep brushing off the little changes, the late nights, the secretive texts. I needed answers. When she came home hours later, I was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said as she walked in. She froze, her hand hovering over her purse. "What's wrong?" I motioned for her to sit down. "I've been trying to trust you, Emily," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "But I can't shake the feeling that something's going on. I need you to be honest with me." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my gaze locked on hers. You know what I'm talking about. The messages. The late nights. The networking events you don't want me to attend. Who is he? For a moment, she looked like she might deny it again. But then she sighed and looked down at her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said quietly. It started as a friendship, and then, it just got complicated. I felt a wave of anger and heartbreak crash over me. Complicated. I repeated, my voice rising. You mean you lied to me? You lied to me over and over again, and now you're telling me it's complicated? She flinched but didn't argue. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry, John. I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust. I don't know how to make it right. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. I don't know if you can, I said. You've destroyed everything we built together. I loved you, Emily. I trusted you. And you threw it all away. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. But I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't bring myself to touch her, to tell her it was going to be okay. Because I didn't know if it ever would be. That night, I packed a bag and left the house. I needed space, needed time to think. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this. I didn't know if I even wanted it to. All I knew was that the love we once had, the love I thought would last a lifetime, was gone, replaced by a chasm I wasn't sure we could ever cross. In the days after I left, my emotions churned relentlessly. Anger, sadness, disbelief, they came in waves, each one heavier than the last. I stayed at a friend's house, unable to face the silence of my own apartment. My friend Dave had been through a tough divorce himself, and he offered support without asking too many questions. I was grateful for that. Emily continued to call, her voicemails filled with tears and apologies. John, please just come home. I'll end it with him. I'll do anything you want. I love you, and I can't stand the thought of losing you. But every word she spoke felt like another reminder of the betrayal. Love? How could she talk about love when she'd spent months lying to me? I ignored her calls and focused on work, on anything that could keep my mind from spiraling. Eventually, though, I had to go back. Not to her, but to my home. I couldn't stay with Dave forever, and part of me knew that running away wasn't the solution. When I walked through the door, Emily was waiting. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy from crying, her voice soft. Thank you for coming back, she said, barely above a whisper. I'm not back, I said, dropping my bag in the hallway. I just needed to be in my own space. She nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. We avoided each other as much as possible, living like strangers under the same roof. I'd leave early in the morning, return late at night, and spend weekends out of the house. Emily tried a few times to talk, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces I couldn't imagine putting back together. One evening, after another long day at work, I found her waiting in the kitchen. Can we please talk? She asked, her voice trembling. I sighed, dropping my keys on the counter. What is there to talk about, Emily? I need you to know how sorry I am, she said. I know I've ruined everything, but I want to try to fix it. I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything. I just don't want to lose you. Her words didn't move me the way they once might have. I'd heard her apologies, her promises, too many times already. You lost me the moment you lied to me, I said quietly. You should have come to me before this ever happened. But you didn't. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. Her shoulders slumped, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, John. I can change. I can be better. I don't want to throw away everything we've built. I shook my head. You already did. After that conversation, something shifted. Emily stopped trying to reach me. She gave me space, and I used that time to figure out what I wanted. I spoke with a therapist, poured my heart out about the anger, the betrayal, and the confusion. I realized that what I was mourning wasn't just my marriage, but the life I thought we had, the future I'd imagined. One day, I came home to find Emily packing a suitcase. I think it's best if I move out, she said quietly. You need space, and I need to figure out who I am without you. I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. She was right. We needed distance to see if there was anything left to salvage, if not as husband and wife, then as co-parents, as two people who once loved each other enough to try. After she left, the house felt empty, but also lighter. I started making small changes, rearranging furniture, painting a wall, finding ways to make the space my own. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Emily and I worked out an arrangement for the kids, splitting time evenly and doing our best to keep things civil. Over time, the tension between us eased. We could talk without bitterness, exchange pleasantries without the weight of what had happened pressing down on us. Eventually, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad, either. I had reached a place of acceptance. What Emily did was wrong, but it didn't have to define the rest of my life. I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying the anger and resentment only hurt me. Letting it go felt like finally setting down a heavy burden. As the months turned into years, I found myself in a better place. I pursued interests I'd neglected, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and reconnected with old friends. I learned that I could be happy on my own, that I didn't need a partner to feel whole. When I eventually met someone new, I was cautious. I took my time, learning to trust again, learning to open my heart without fear. She was kind and patient, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Looking back, I see that Emily's affair, as painful as it was, didn't destroy me. It forced me to confront who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. It taught me that love, trust, and honesty are the foundation of any relationship, and that when those foundations crack, it's okay to walk away. Now, I stand on solid ground. My life isn't the one I imagined when Emily and I first set our vows, but it's mine. It's honest, it's strong, and it's full of possibility. And for that, I'm grateful.